Hello, my name is Ryan Higbee, and today I'm going to be talking about concept-based teaching and learning. Today I hope to answer 3 questions. The first is, what is concept-based teaching and learning? So we all have a very clear understanding about what we're talking about. What is one way to find concepts within benchmarks? This is a procedure that I have used with the teachers with whom I work. And then also, when can we incorporate concepts into our teaching practice? Where I hope to provide a couple of different examples of concept-based curriculum and instruction in the classrooms that I have seen. Before we begin to answer those questions, I want to talk a little bit about who I am and how I enter into this conversation. I work for South St. Paul Public Schools, and I work in an elementary school where I'm a curriculum coordinator. In our school, we try to write curriculum that is concept-based and to teach that so that students learn about big ideas, concepts. I will be presenting a lot of different ideas today that I can't necessarily take credit for, and so I wanted to make sure to let you know how I came to learn about concept-based teaching and learning. Although I have learned a lot from colleagues and through workshops, these 2 texts have really helped me to further my understanding of what concepts are and how we can teach them to students. The Understanding by Design was a book that I read long ago in my undergrad program, but when I read it, I was focused solely on the design part. So I focused on how we should be planning curriculum with a backwards design model, but I wasn't paying any attention to what Wiggins and McTighe were saying about what kind of curriculum we should be writing. The other text that has been very helpful to me is Concept-Based Curriculum and Instruction for the Thinking Classroom by H. Lynn Erickson. Both of these texts are certainly not the most current from these authors, but they really helped me in my understanding of this idea. So our first question today is, what is concept-based teaching and learning? Traditionally, the focus has been on teaching students knowledge and skills, at least in the experiences that I have been in. And again, so that we are clear, when I say knowledge, I'm really talking about facts that are locked in time and place, and I'll try to use the verb know when I'm talking about knowledge. And then I also want to be clear to say when I'm talking about skills, those are very specific skills particular to a subject matter, and the verb I'll use there is do. So one of the ways that we have really focused on knowledge and skills in the experiences I've been a part of is in our professional learning communities. We do plan curriculum with the backwards design. So we first start with, what is our goal? And the question that we ask is, what do we want students to know, and what do we want students to be able to do? We've done a lot of work with Rick DeFore and his work with PLCs. And it's very interesting because I went back on his website to see what this question is now. And it says, what do we want students to learn? But traditionally, we have been focused on what do we want students to know and do, specific knowledge and skills. We also have focused on knowledge and skills through the ICAN Statements. This is a phenomena that happens in a lot of different elementary schools. By writing ICAN statements, we do focus on skills because we focus on what we want the students to be able to do. This example comes from the kindergarten citizenship and government benchmarks, and it would read, I can describe symbols of our nation. So it's very locked in a specific time, our current time, what are current symbols. It's locked in a specific place, into our nation, the United States. And then it also is focused on a particular skill. We want students to be able to describe. This ICAN statement would be an example of a 2nd grade ICAN that comes from the history benchmarks. I can create timelines. So a very specific skill that we want students to be able to do, but not paying any attention to why it would be important to show or to be able to create a timeline. The academic standards also lead us to focus on specific knowledge and skills. This comes from the introduction of the Minnesota K-12 Academic Standards document, the social studies standards. It says, as required by law, the standards identify the academic knowledge and skills. And then from another section in the introduction, this particular section is called Organization of the Standards, It talks about how each anchor standard is composed of one or more grade level benchmarks, and those benchmarks are written as learning goals, again, with specific knowledge and skills. So we are very focused on teaching students knowledge and skills. The actual benchmarks then within the standards document lead us to focus again on knowledge and skills. Here's a first grade citizenship and government benchmark, and it says explain why and when the Pledge of Allegiance is recited, and to provide examples of basic flag etiquette. From third grade geography, use maps and concepts to be able to describe. And then a fifth grade history benchmark, identify major conflicts between the colonies and England following the 7 Years' War. So very specific knowledge and very specific skills that we really want our students to learn. The problem, though, with focusing only on discrete knowledge and skills is that sometimes that's not always engaging, relevant, challenging, or significant. So if we focus on concepts in addition to knowledge and skills, we can help to mitigate this problem. And the K-12 Minnesota standards for social studies actually do point us in that direction, but it might be buried a little bit. Here again from the introduction, it says, in addition to mastering a body of knowledge, students must be able to apply their understanding of complex situations and contexts, some of which are yet to be envisioned. So here the authors of the standards are saying, once they have learned this body of knowledge, we want students to be able to apply those ideas, which I'm taking to mean concepts, to other situations and in other contexts. The only problem is this is a line that's in the introduction, and not many of our teachers are reading this very discrete part of the standard document. And again, to be very clear, when I am talking about understanding something, understanding a big idea, I am talking about concepts. So what are concepts and how do they differ from knowledge? Well, H. Erickson says that concepts are mental constructs that umbrella different topical examples, and they have to be timeless, abstract, universal, and transferable. I like to call them life's big ideas that can transfer from one context to the next. And Lynn Erickson also talks about how there needs to be a synergy between the teaching of knowledge and skills and concepts. We can't have students, especially our youngest students, be learning about these big abstract ideas without any sort of specific context in which to make sense of those. But we also can't only be teaching them knowledge and skills that are locked into a specific situation. So we need to have a synergy or a balance between these three parts of our curriculum. So why concepts? Well, one is because if we want to be teaching through inquiry, students can't construct an understanding of facts, of the 9 planets or the conflicts that led to the American Revolution, but they can construct an understanding of concepts. They can make meaning of concepts. Concepts also require students to think at a greater depth. It goes beyond just rote memorization. The Minnesota Teacher of the Year a couple of years ago said, if you can Google the answers to your test questions suck. So the idea is we need to be able to get students to think at greater depths, to be able to apply and analyze, synthesize, and evaluate knowledge as opposed to just memorizing it. And concepts also transfer to contexts that are more engaging, relevant, and significant. So again, to wrap up, what is concept-based teaching and learning? I would say it is a balance of learning knowledge and skills to be able to make meaning of timeless, abstract, universal, and transferable concepts.